All right, Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar was on Joe Rogan. It's on Joe Rogan number 1315. If you don't know who Bob Lazar is, because most of my audience apparently is under 25 years old, so you young ones don't know anything. Bob Lazar is an awesome guy who about 30 years ago, I became aware of him in the early 90s. He was working at S4. Now there's a very interesting thing that I've seen no one else talk about. S4 is a secret installation in America near Area 51, where they're basically trying to reverse engineer these UFOs, these captured extraterrestrial craft. And one real good piece of information that Bob Lazar mentioned in the Joe Rogan talk was that at least one or some of these were recovered from an archaeological dig. There's some very interesting things, because 30 years ago, more or less, a bit less, I became aware of Bob Lazar in early 90s, 92, 93, something like that. But by then, I'd been researching and writing this book. This book came out in 95, but I'd been researching it and writing for about 3 years. It took me to put it together. Now, Bob Lazar is in here. There's stuff on Bob Lazar here. There's stuff on anti-gravity machines. And what Bob Lazar confirmed in this interview he did with Joe Rogan is absolutely 100% that my idea about anti-gravity is correct, which is what I described in here, but it's also in my fiction books. So if you Google my name, and you'll see the Overlords of Mars. Now the interesting part is that in the Overlords of Mars, I describe how this anti-gravity craft works. And there's 2 books out, Inception and Stasis. And the third one I'm busy writing. But anyway, the thing is not about my books. The thing that's interesting about Bob Lazar is the stuff that he discussed about how these anti-gravity machines work is exactly what I saw. Because in here, I also describe an event that happened. I didn't describe the whole event, because there's some parts of it are just too crazy to, and at the time when I wrote this book, I was 26 years old. And I thought, man, if I put that in the book, people are just going to think I'm crazy. So I'm just going to dumb it down a little bit and not tell the whole story. So what happened on the 1st of April, which was also another reason why I just, I did write about it in here. So on the 1st of April in South Africa, in Cape Town, a bunch of UFOs came down the N1, which is the national highway. And they basically hung around in the skies of Cape Town for hours. Now, my girlfriend at the time saw them out of the window, and she was busy going to bed. I was talking with her brother about something that at the time was kind of important, because I remember she called me and I was like kind of irritated because she was interrupting a cool conversation, and I was like, yeah, what's up? She says, no, come look at this. And I was like, oh, okay, let's go look at this. But and I looked out the window, and there's these lights, there's like these floating lights, and they've got these other tiny lights sort of zipping around near them. Now we had a camera at the time, so this is 94 or 95, something like that, either early sort of summerish because this came out in December of 95, I think, or November of 95, and I believe that the stuff that we saw, was before I finished the book. I think I was in the process of writing it. I don't remember exactly where I was. I'm trying to just see if I have the date of when this came out. It was definitely 95, but I don't know. I don't remember exactly. Anyway, so we saw this, and her brother was there, and we sort of looked at them for a while, filmed them for a while. I had a little telescope. And when you put the telescope on it, you could just see the light sort of was shimmering and moving about. Now, the interesting part is that Bob Lazar mentions that that's exactly how these things move, but they create gravity fields which warp light, radio waves, electromagnetic waves, and so on. And this is absolutely true, and I knew that at the time because, first of all, my girlfriend saw a different color from what I saw, because they were kind of like blinking sort of lights. They changed color. They shifted for me, between red and green mostly, and sometimes a little flash of yellow. For her, there was more yellow, hardly any red, and green as well. So she could see different colors. Now I've got a theory that women and men see colors differently, and I believe that. You're not going to convince me otherwise. But because both her brother and I saw the same colors, she saw a different color. Anyway, she was tired and she decided after a while, okay, so it's UFOs, can't do anything about it, I'm going to bed. I and her brother were like, fuck this, so we got into my car with I was working as a bodyguard at the time, so I had my 357 Magnum. I took it with me, and we got in the car and we kind of tried to follow where these lights were. And we got out to what is present day Camps Bay, but in an area of Camps Bay which is pretty dark. There's like some villas at the bottom, and there's one of the little steps from the main road that goes all the way down to the beach. And in these steps, it's pretty dark. There wasn't any houses around there at the time. So we parked the car up, we went down, and I think, we had the camera and we filmed it for a bit, but then we went down into these steps because it was just like as close as we could get. And these things were hovering over the ocean, and they had like these, so there was like a main craft, and then there's smaller ones, like little zippy, they look like round balls, like Foo Fighters, I guess. And they were just flying around, sort of coming backwards and forwards, going close to the big one and then going out again. And we sat there and we watched these things. And so the crazy part of what happened, which fuck it happened. I have a witness, it's I'm gonna say it. So the crazy thing is, we're watching these things over the ocean, and I started to think, well, these things, I was absolutely convinced, it was clear these things were not like swamp gas, they weren't like weather balloons, there weren't any kind of aircraft that we could create. The way they moved, when they moved, they just changed direction. It was obvious to me it was an anti-gravity craft. I've been, reading science fiction since I was a kid, and I've been researching this stuff for a long time, and, figuring out how anti-gravity works. And there's a couple of things that I'm going to come back to about Bob Lazar and the stuff he said, which I believe I have information that would help, would confirm what he said. But anyway, we'll get to that. The thing is, watching these things, and I sort of thought, what are they? They, are they like aliens? And then I thought, if they are aliens, if they are that much more advanced, telepathy kind of works. I believe I've described before on one of the videos that I think I discussed precognition, and how junk DNA can be used to communicate, with time distortions, and also how I had telepathic sort of experiences with my brother and with a couple of other people over long distances. And again, you don't have to believe me, you can think I'm just a crazy fucker, but there's a 2-hour video by a guy called Michael Persinger called No More Secrets. It's on YouTube. And he's a professor in a university, and he's basically figured out how telepathy works, and that it does work. He's got a theory that is a scientific theory that sort of seems to work to me, makes sense. And he's done tests with people to prove that it works. Now, telepathy actually does work. And they've done this because they've managed to communicate telepathically with people inside a nuclear submarine. And this is a military experiment. I don't remember exactly how I got this information, or where I found it, but what they did was they put one guy hooked up to a machine inside a nuclear submarine, another guy on land, and then they made the guy on land have really violent, vicious thoughts about the guy on the submarine. And they're both hooked up to all sorts of machines. Now the guy in the submarine, whenever the other guy had some vicious, evil thoughts about him, like he was supposed to think about killing him, hacking him to pieces or stuff like that, the guy in the submarine got a spike on his, I don't remember if it was like skin conductivity or his heart rate or something, but they could notice a definite spike. This, by the way, ties up with the information that I believe I told you in the precognition video, which I discuss in this book, which is a guy called McCratey, and a Russian guy called Peter Garayev, who have done, now McCarthy trains military personnel to learn to how to get this precognition because it saves lives, okay? So the military uses this stuff. It's not bullshit. I'm not making it up, okay? You don't, look, I'm not asking you to buy the book. You can buy the book, don't buy the book, I don't give a shit. Look it up online. You know, that McCarthy is a real person. I've communicated with him. I've got his emails from him. He's a real scientist who works in conjunction with the military. Some of his work is military based. And Peter Garayev is just a genius, a Russian genius who worked with McCarthy and they confirm each other's work. Anyway, so I'm sitting there. I kind of had this telepathic experience. I thought, shit, let me just try it. Let me just try and communicate with these beings. If they're aliens, who the fuck knows? Maybe I can talk to them. So I tried it. I tried to like sort of send a message in my mind, sort of like say, hey, who are you guys? What are you doing? And I got a message back. Now, before you freak out, and think that I'm crazy, hold on a second, okay? I got a message back saying, hi, yes, we can read you. We can hear you, sort of thing. It's difficult to describe telepathy as it happened because it wasn't exactly words and it wasn't just emotions. It had definite content, and you get a definite sensation and you get a definite words there that make sense to you, but I don't know that it's necessarily English as such. It's like, or whether it's your brain interpreting, it's very hard to tell. But it's very clear, it was very clear. It was like words, although I'm not hearing words in my mind, but I'm getting a definite clear words message in my head. And I got this clear message, sort of like, yeah, we can hear you, we can talk if you want. And I swear to you that in that moment, in that precise moment when that happened, I, with my mind being somewhat skeptical of nature, I swear to you that my first thought was, Jesus, look at my fucked up brain, what kind of bullshit it will invent just to try and make me believe there's UFOs just because I like spaceships and all that shit, Look at my fucked up brain trying to fool me into believing that I'm communicating telepathically with aliens. I swear to God, that's what I thought. And immediately I got a message in my head saying, well then, why don't you test it? Ask your friend to think something and not tell you what it is. He can't hear us, but we can read him. And I got this image, like he's got almost like a fog, like his own perception doesn't allow him to receive their messages, but they can read him clearly. Said, so ask him to think of a question for us. Don't let him tell you what it is. And then we'll tell you what the answer to his question is, and then you can check that this is not just in your head, which I thought was a pretty good scientific experiment, and it didn't come from my head. I felt like from them. And I hadn't said anything to him about this. I hadn't said to my friend that I'm going to do this. So I just turned to him and I said, have you got a question that you'd like to ask the guys inside the spacecraft? And he said, yeah, I do. Okay, I said, well, don't say anything. Just think it in your head. Don't tell me. And the guy's like, why? I said, just do it. Just do it. Just humor me for a second. And he's like, okay. And I got an answer. Now, I cannot remember what that answer is because the reason I can't remember is it meant nothing to me. The answer that I got meant nothing to me. It was completely disjointed. It was something to the effects of, you can't do that now. It'll take longer. And yeah, you're good with that stuff. Something along those lines. But it was pretty specific. It wasn't as, the way I've said it now sounds very generic. It was very specific. It was something to the level of, yeah, don't worry about that. That will happen later. And, it's the color blue or something along those lines. It was very specific. But it didn't mean anything to me because I didn't know what the question that he formulated in his head was. So I turned to him and I said, hey, I think the answer is this. And just the expression on his face was like, how the hell did you know that? Like, it's not me, man. They just told me they can read what's in your head and they can communicate with me. So I'm just telling you what they said. And he was like, fuck, that was weird. But, after that, we just started trying to communicate with them. And, you know, I basically asked them, what the hell are you doing here? You know, where are you from? And that sort of thing. And the answers I got were that they're somehow related to us. You know, they're like kind of our like cousins or something, you know. That's the way they kind of explained it. And they, oh, just hold on a second.
Go away, please.
So, yeah, sorry about that. Just got interrupted. Kid wanted something, but she's all right. So, yeah, I asked them, like, well, what are you doing here, sort of thing. And they said, well, we're just measuring stuff. Just checking some things out about how your planet, and they did mention something to the effect about pollution, but it wasn't pollution in the sense of you know, smog and stuff like that. It was sort of like the sensation I got was like there was a lot of electromagnetic sort of pollution or something along those lines, and that I got the distinct impression that they knew that some people on our planet definitely are aware of them. I also got an image of what they look like, and they basically looked like humans, you know. But I got the feeling they were maybe like taller than average and like very sparsely haired, you know, like very sort of thin hair, blondish, and there was 3 people inside this craft. So the guy that was talking to me was also doing something else while he was there. There's another guy that now and then made some comments, sort of like, because I asked like, where are you from? And they said like, we're from far away. Like, you know, they didn't give a position, sort of thing. And they said, no, we're not the only ones. You know, there's others. There's other types as well. But they sort of made it like, you know, we're friendly, sort of like they're the friendly ones. And there's others that are not so friendly, apparently. And I got the sensation. I said, but how many are you in the craft? Because I started to get pretty specific. And I asked, you know, and they sort of said, oh, there's me, like the captain guy that was talking to me. Then there's another guy who like kind of basically said hi. He was busy doing something, but it's like basically said, yeah, hi, I'm here. And he was kind of like, I don't know, the surveyor or the guy that was like measuring whatever the hell they were measuring with these like balls and things that were flying around. And there was a third guy who basically sort of like, you know, he was kind of like, and the captain guy said, look, he's busy, so we're not going to bug him, you know, just talk with me, sort of thing. And that was basically it. And we sort of said, okay, well, you know, and then I said, okay, well, if you got any other sort of questions, and we were like, well, how do you build, you know, like my friend was like, how do you build one of the machines? Can I build one of them? And they said, yeah. You know, when he asked the question, I laughed at him. I said, like, what the fuck? You're going to build a fucking anti-gravity machine? Yeah, right. And they kind of scolded me for it. You know, they were like, don't talk to him like that. You know, he's more likely to build one than you are. You're clever, you're smart, you can do the telepathy thing, but he's got an aptitude for this sort of thing. Which was, again, weird, because that kid did. I mean, when he was like a young teenager, he built, he could take apart a TV and put it back together and fix it, you know, like a broken television, like with the, you know, the old ones with the tube and stuff. He'd fix that. He'd take it apart and put it together again. Nobody taught him, you know, like, I don't know how the hell he did that. He was also very mechanical and very electromagnetic, sort of wired. Clever boy. Anyway, so that happened, and you know, then the confirmation that of a lot of the stuff that I saw, and that now I filmed these things for like hours. Oh, the other thing that happened is like, I was like, man, I'm getting tired, and like they said, look, you're getting tired now. You know, it's okay, you can go if you want. And I was like, yeah, I am tired. And then I thought, fuck this. You know, when am I ever gonna get to talk to fucking aliens telepathically again with them flying right in the sky here in front of me? So I said, no, fuck it. I can do it. I can stay up a bit more. And, you know, because it did take energy kind of out of me to like communicate, but I did it, and I asked them some more stuff. To be honest with you, I can't remember the details exactly of everything that I asked them after that, because I was tired, and I was mostly translating for my friend, who was kind of asking about generic things as well. And then he started to go on to like personal stuff, like, what can you tell the future? And they were like, look, we're kind of busy, sort of thing. And eventually we said, okay, that's it. Let's go. And one other point. On the way down these steps, now, if you don't know me, the people that do know me will understand this. But if you don't know me, you'll sort of think, well, that's not a big deal. But on the way down these steps, I was armed. I had a handgun on me, my working weapon, and I don't ever leave my handgun. I never left. I mean, I'm in the UK, obviously I don't have any guns. They're not allowed and whatever. But out there, I never left my handgun out of my never mind sight. I never left it out of my contact. It's like it's a loaded gun, and it's I don't leave it out of my away from my body. Like I'm the type of guy that if he's alone at home, okay, and he's got his handgun right here in front of the table, for whatever reason, gets up, gets a glass of water, comes back into the room, and let's say that when I put the gun down, it was empty, right? I unloaded it, it's empty. That's the only reason I would like walk away from my own gun, like if it's already empty and the bullets are somewhere else. I go out, I come back with a glass of water, there's nobody else in the house. I'm the type of person that will pick up the gun, open it, and check it before I do anything with it, even though it's only me alone and I know that it's unloaded. That's kind of how safety conscious I am, because accidental discharges happen. I've seen all sorts of weird shit working and whatever. But on going to try and see these UFOs and whatever, I was just like, there's something really strong inside me that was like, don't go there with a gun. And I took it out. I took the gun out. I took the whole holster out. And I put it down on the floor next to the steps, just a little bit into the bush, so if somebody else walked down, they wouldn't see it. And I put it down there, and I walked away from my gun. Now, I can't describe to you what that's like in my head normally. The very idea of doing that is just absurd. It's like leave my gun in the middle of the night, like on a random piece of stair, off a staircase. And we go down another good, maybe dozen meters at least or more, And, there's all sorts of people around there that could have been walking by or just sleeping there or who knows. But I did that and didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt right. Then when we went back up, after we finished talking with them, we went back to the car and I looked at the clock and I could not believe it, because this whole experience for me, I thought took about 20 minutes. Well, basically 5 hours had passed. And by the time we drove back home, which is only a few kilometers away, they were still in the sky. Now the sun was up, they were still in the sky, I could see them naked eye, and I filmed them. I carried on filming them because now I could charge the battery again, and I filmed them outside my window and I talked over the video and so on. So I made copies of these videos. Oh, and at the end when they left, they just sort of like, whew, just went. And when they, when that finished, I made copies of the videos, I gave it to my family, my friends, I said, look, I'm not fucking crazy, there it is, all the stuff I've been writing and breaking your balls with for the last few years, it's real. Shortly after that, shortly after the book was published, so it must have been 95, because the book came out in December of 95, I'm sure of that, or November, I think, of 95. Now this is the updated one. Yeah, here you go. 20th of November 95 is when the book sort of came out. And, this is the 2014 edition, so I've added more information that I found out since, But shortly after this came out, my phones were tapped, which I think I discussed in one of the videos at some point. My phones were tapped. I knew phones were tapped because it was just they were making odd noises. This is early 90s, government work. And because I was working as a bodyguard and I had contacts in the South African police and in the Secret Service and stuff, one of the guys I worked with had a good relationship with the guy that was pretty much, he wasn't quite the head of the whole Secret Service, but he was really high up in it. And he said, look, my friend is being bugged and he doesn't know why, and we want to find out, can you let us know? And he said, yeah, we've got equipment that can figure it out. So they hooked up the stuff to my line, and they this guy said, yeah, you are being bugged, But he was uncomfortable. And I said, well, why are you guys bugging me? You know, what the fuck? And he goes, no, but that's the problem. You're definitely being bugged, but I don't know by whom. It's not us. You know, it's not anybody in our department. And I'll come back and I'll check on that. And he did. And said, it's not us. I don't know who the hell's doing it, which was kind of odd. Then I got broken into. Now it was really interesting how I got broken into, because it's like somebody had the key. There was only one way to get into that apartment, and it was the front door. There was literally no other way to get in, because there was a window about this high, which was, you know, if you made a mistake and fell, you'd fall 4 floors onto concrete. But nobody got into that window because it was in the bathroom, and it had all my, you know, the shampoo and whatever, all the stuff was on the windowsill, which when I showered left like rings. And when I went in and I saw it being burgled, not a single one of those things had been moved. So nobody came through the window, and the window was closed, which, you know, you wouldn't be able to do if you would have to break the window. So they must have come in through the front door. Now the thing is, I had cash, I had a money box. They didn't touch the cash. They didn't touch anything except the video camera. They took the video camera and they took all the tapes of the UFO stuff. They left the bag. And they didn't take the SLR camera. They only took the video camera. So I didn't have a copy of those videos anymore. And I thought, fucking hell, except for one copy, which was out with somebody. And I got that VHS back. And then, you know, I didn't do anything with it. The book came out. I was traveling. I moved house. You know, my life is very complicated. And, you know, about a few years ago, I got it converted into digital thing. And it's on my blog. I put it on my blog somewhere. And this, you know, it's degraded, it's very degraded. But the thing that was interesting was that when you were looking at these objects through the viewfinder in the camera, you could see like magnetic fields connecting, or what looked like magnetic fields connecting the little balls to the big ship. And they have different colors. And you can see a little bit of that in the video that is now on the blog. I don't remember the exact link, but it's somewhere on the blog, and I'll put it on there. Whatever. I'm sorry, guys. You know, I'm kind of lazy and kind of busy. So anyway, so that's kind of my story, but it's not the only time that UFOs, that I saw UFOs. I saw them after that. Oh, and by the way, on that 1st of April, the next day in the newspapers, it was in the newspapers that these things had come down the N1, and like whole police stations up in the Karoo, when there isn't that many people, you know, and they're like, the whole police station came out to look at them and said, what the hell is that? You know, it's like these UFOs going down the national highway sort of thing. So a lot of people saw them. It wasn't just me, you know, and it wasn't just me and my friend. You know, a lot of people saw them. And now here's another weird story. Fast forward to, I think, the year 2008, 7, between 2006 and 2008, somewhere there. I think it was 2008, but I'm not 100% sure. Might have been, yeah, I think it was probably 2008. I'm sitting at home on the 5th floor of an apartment building that I lived in, and it had French glass doors, which, by the way, weirdly enough, so did my old apartment in Cape Town. But this one was much bigger, you know, I was earning decent money at the time and so on. And I'm sitting there writing something. So I'm at the table, at the dining room table, writing something. I'm 4 meters away or so from these glass doors, maybe 5, because it's a pretty big lounge. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, one of the glass just pops. It just like, bam! And it's like shatterproof glass, so it just like had like a star, and then like everything cracked, but nothing hit the window. I went up there and I was like, what the fuck just happened? And I told the landlady, I said, listen, I was sitting here, I didn't throw anything at it, you know, it's not me, honest to God, it just popped. And it was a summer's day. And of course the landlady didn't believe me, and I said, look, honestly, it wasn't me, but you know, she was kind of pissed off, but there was no, you know, because I took pictures of it. There wasn't like anything had gone through it. It's not like anything had hit it. It was just completely starred. And I thought, what the hell was that? That was just so weird, you know. And I asked people that build glasses, because I'm in construction. I was in construction, so. And there's some guy that said, oh, it can be a bubble, and if, you know, the expansion of the gas. And I mean, the explanations I got were so ridiculous, though. It just didn't make sense. But the next day in the papers, there was or a few days later, and they had the date. And I believe I did save that newspaper, but you know, I've moved 52 times in my life. I don't know where that bit of paper has gone. It's probably somewhere in one of my files, but it was in the papers a couple of days later, and it said the date, and the date was the same day that my glasses burst up. This guy was taking pictures along the Thames, and when he got them developed, you couldn't see anything, you know, you couldn't see, because I also went out and looked, and I thought, what the hell is something flew by, a jet, but there was no noise, nothing. And this guy took some photographs, and when he had them developed, there's these discs in the pictures, because for some reason film or cameras somehow pick up stuff that your eye doesn't pick up. And so there was these discs, these like series of discs flying along, and he'd taken a few pictures, and it was in the paper, because they're like, I don't know what this is. It's not a cameraman. There's nothing wrong with my lens. So it was like, you know, UFOs flying down the Thames. But I think it was. And you got to keep in mind that when you can create your own gravity fields, and that's what I like about the Bob Lazar interview. He describes exactly how these things would work, which is exactly how I presume they would work, and how the video of the weapons test, what Mark Carlotto calls the weapons test on these UFOs, whether they were shooting at the UFOs, whether it was a weapons test, but it was filmed by the space shuttle, and I'm doing this from memory, and I've got a terrible memory, but I think it was STS-48. I always get the number wrong. It was a space shuttle transmission that filmed these UFOs entering the Earth's atmosphere, or rather being in the Earth's atmosphere, getting shot at with what is probably very powerful railguns, and flying out of the Earth's atmosphere at speeds that you can only do, you know, if you've got anti-gravity devices. And while I'm speaking, I'm just trying to see if I can find the STS thing, because I don't want to lie to you. But anyway, I probably won't be able to get it, but it's in the book somewhere. The thing is, these craft exist, these anti-gravity machines exist. And what happened, what I thought was really interesting in the Bob Lazar interview with Joe Rogan, it's about 2 hours, but it's worth listening to, is that he said that this flying saucer that he worked on, when it you know, took off, so it would take off, sort of like levitate up, but when it really pissed off, it would go like that and then just fly in the direction, which makes sense, because from his description, it sounds like this was a pretty basic little disc, and it would make sense that it would create the gravity field only in one direction, because how you travel with a machine that can create gravity fields is you create a gravity field in front of you, so you're basically being falling into the gravity field, and internally you've got a counter field that counters whatever maneuvers you're doing, so you don't get spread into a thin layer of jam. So yeah, I know it sounds really weird, sort of alien encounter thing, but it happened, and look, that's not even the strangest fucking thing that happened to me. So it's up there, you know, but I've had something even more strange than that happen, which nothing to do with UFOs, just some weird shit. But maybe I'll talk about that another day. I'm definitely putting it in a book at some point, but yeah, it's just, I think you guys are probably going to think I'm crazy enough as it is. So the other thing that I thought was Bob Lazar was trying to describe the material that this UFO is made of, and he said he couldn't tell whether it was metal or ceramic. My guess is it's a mixture of the two, because the way that you create anti-gravity fields, you have to have dielectric materials. Dielectric materials basically can hold a charge, and you have to have direct current rather than alternating current. These are just the basics, and I got this from a guy called Professor Searle, which I met and spoke to. I went to meet him, and this guy was creating these little discs that would just float up and caused a bit of a stir in the little English village where he did them, because they kind of did bright lights, and then he said that one of them went through his barn. You know, he had like a shed where he worked, and it just flew up, and he said, oh, what if I turned the voltage and I put it higher? And it just disappeared. He said, I never found that one again. It made a hole in the ceiling, in the roof of his shed. Now, Professor Searle has been called a quack, a weird, and whatever, but I spoke to this guy. He's definitely eccentric, but I don't think he's crazy. And the reason that I know Bob Lazar is not bullshitting is because, well, the evidence of it is overwhelming now. he said things almost 30 years ago that we now know about. He came out with that stuff when he talked about it, and they tried to destroy this guy's life. I mean, they tried to arrest him. They tried to say that he was involved in prostitution and all sorts of shit, you know. And his birth certificate disappeared. It's just ridiculous, you know. Like he went to MIT, I think, and or it was MIT or I can't remember. Anyway, some prestigious school, and all his records have disappeared. He's like he doesn't exist. He can't get a passport and stuff. It's just the most weird shit, you know. And he talks about that in the interview with Joe Rogan. So it's definitely a worthwhile interview to watch. And apparently the other guy that's on the show did a documentary with Bob Lazar. I'm not a huge fan of the other guy because he seems very excitable and very like me sort of thing. I'm not a huge fan of Joe Rogan either because the very few bits that I saw of Joe Rogan, I didn't like his interview style. He kept interrupting, and I think he's a bit of a shill, and I don't agree with like his, you know, I think he covers stuff up and whatever. But on this interview, he actually did a good job. He asked decent questions, pertinent questions, stayed out of the way, and let Bob do quite a bit of the talking. So yeah, it's a really interesting interview, and I do think that the material that the spacecraft he worked on was built out of both supposedly non-conductive materials and conductive materials. And the reason I say this is because this Professor Searle was basically saying that he mixed together plastic and metal to get these dielectric materials that would hold a charge. And it doesn't make sense, right? In the physics and the electromagnetic physics that we know, that we get taught at school, doesn't make sense, but it does work. And I'm trying to get back up Harold Aspden, a guy I met before he passed away, and unfortunately his widow also passed away recently. And I had a lot of his documents, a lot of his books were up on the web, which I'm going to try and put back up. But the guy that was doing it took them down, and you know, I just need to get this stuff back from him and put it back up. And I'll do it for free. I mean, I'll keep the maintenance cost of that going, just because Harold Aspden is a genius, and I could sort of understand some of the stuff that he wrote. He wrote a book called Physics Without Einstein, which basically, very politely, because it's very English. So unlike Owen Benjamin, who Owen Benjamin says Einstein was an incestuous, thieving, lying piece of shit, which he was. You know, but Harold Aspden, very, very English and very politely sort of mentioned that the stuff that Einstein talked about had already been discovered and had already been discussed and had already been written about by people several years before in the late 1800s. And he gives the references and stuff in his books, but his books are not easily available because they weren't available on Amazon and so on. And his wife asked me to please keep the stuff going. We communicated now and then. She was, you know, in her 80s. And I did. I kept it going as long as I could. But then she passed away, and I didn't know she passed away. She lived quite far, and I only saw her like a couple of times. And the guy, the Chinese guy that was maintaining the thing, took it down because he didn't receive payment, but he didn't tell me anything about it. You know, and I contacted him recently, and he said, "I think I still have the files. I just need to send them to you." And you know, but I just got to chase him up on it. And the other interesting thing that Bob Lazar mentioned about the anti-gravity craft was that there was no wires, and that the reactor that created the gravity fields would work by just the components being put close to each other. Now, I was in the process of doing a master's degree in electromechanical engineering, and I had found a professor that would accept my thesis. And I just want to, I think it's in here. Yeah, and my thesis was going to be to reconstruct, try and rebuild something that the Nazis used in their submarines. Because this is a document that I got from the British Library, which is top secret, but has since been declassified. Now, the Germans in their submarines had methods of creating energy that no one could figure out, no one understood and they didn't know how it was done. And one of these, and I think there's a diagram in here, there we go. One of these was with these magnets positioned in this way that apparently produced energy out of thin air. And this wasn't even the one that produced the most energy. This was just one of them. Now, they powered a lot of stuff on the submarine with these things, so they're not toys. And there's a description of the other one. So there's, it's a pretty technical sort of paper, and this was a debriefing paper so when the Americans and the British captured the various crews, they debriefed them a bit, and so it was done by Hans Kohler. It's called the Kohler Hans Kohler Object of Visit and Summary. Kohler is the inventor of two devices by which it is alleged electrical energy may be derived without a chemical or mechanical source of power. Since an official interest was taken in his inventions by the German Admiralty, it was felt that the investigation was warranted, although normally it would be considered that such a claim could only be fraudulent. This is a military document, and it was basically, they tried to investigate how these things worked. And they didn't really get to the bottom of it, but these are the notes on it. I was going to do my master's thesis because I had got some money. One of the companies that I worked for had tried to do all sorts of dodgy shit, and I told them, no, you're not going to do that. So they fired me, and I sued them, and I won some money. So I hadn't been working, but I could afford not to work for a while, and I wanted to pursue this. But unfortunately, I was training in martial arts. I was training in martial arts every day, a couple of times a day. I was teaching, and in a demonstration, actually, I was doing absolutely nothing spectacular. I literally was walking towards somebody, and my Achilles tendon snapped completely all the way through. So for the next 6 months, I couldn't really do very much, and I wrote, and I tried to get proprioception back in my foot, because the work that the NHS did was pretty tragic. I'm in my pajamas, so it's gonna look very sexy, but just so you can see sort of NHS level work on, there you go, that little scar is, that's 8 years old now, and you can still, actually I'll show you something pretty kind of gross, but there you go. So you can see the scar there. Now look what happens if I tip my, you can still see that. Now if I hadn't done my own work on it, my own proprioception on it, my own little work with an electromagnetic mat that seemed to really do some pretty amazing healing, I'd probably be a little bit of a cripple. I've got full functionality back. It looks ugly and whatever, but I can kick, jump, whatever. And I didn't know, but apparently martial artists, basketball players, and soccer players quite often get a broken, their tendons break later on in life, when they get in their 40s and 50s and so on. And so that kind of put a stop to it, because I wasn't working, I had sort of limited money. I was busy getting married to my second wife, which was probably the biggest mistake of my life, but I got a daughter out of it, although I haven't seen her for a while, 4 years now. So, one of those life things. And, when that sort of stuff is going on in your life, a lot of things drop by the wayside. But it was really invigorating to listen to Bob Lazar again, because I'd listened to the original stuff that he mentioned. Here's another little tidbit that I've heard no one mention before. And it's in my book, and I talk about, because I've updated this since I wrote this. I wrote this in 95. Nothing in here has been disproven. And then I've updated it in 2014 with more stuff that I found out that I didn't know at this time, that I found out later, but it all ties together. So Bob Lazar worked in a place that was called S4. Now, do you want to know something really interesting about the Nazi top secret projects where these things happened? Well, they were buried in the side of mountains up in the, I can't remember now if it's in the Poland or in Germany, or in some deep forests anyways. guess what they called these bases where they built the secret stuff, like the V1s, the V2s, and some other things. They called them base S1, S2, and S3 was where Hans Kammler, I believe his first name was Hans Kammler. Kammler was the architect of all these secret places. He is personally responsible for the murder of probably hundreds of thousands of people because he used slave labor without hesitation and just used it like a meat grinder. And these bases are huge. I mean, we're talking about kilometers of underground tunnels and labs and stuff. You know, tons and tons and tons of concrete corridors, of concrete to create these underground corridors. And the S3 one was the one that was the most secret, where no one survived. All the scientists that were there, all the German scientists were killed before, and it was all emptied out before the Allied forces reached it. Hans Kammler supposedly died 4 times, at least 3 or 4 times. He disappeared, and oh no, he died here. Oh no, he died there. Oh no, he died there. And he probably lived the rest of his life off in Argentina together with Martin Bormann and Hitler and whatever. You know, the absurd idea that Martin Bormann died in running out of the bunker and dropped dead in the street, and 60 years later, while they're digging up works in that area, they find him paved over a parking lot or some shit. It's just absurd. Martin Bormann's signature is together with Juan Perón's in Argentina. Absolutely, the Nazis left and lived in Argentina. They got a fucking country-sized place where you had to have SS ID to get in. It's ridiculous. Bariloche, I forgot the full name of the city, where they were still doing like Nazi experiments and things. So yeah, I believe that the Nazis did rediscover anti-gravity. Thomas Townsend Brown got there before them. 1920, I always forget if it's 1924, 1928, but all of that stuff is in here. See, this book is not light reading, but it's a very good reference book. It's got stuff about Thomas Townsend Brown, it's got stuff about Nikola Tesla, it's got stuff about Bob Lazar, it's got how the anti-gravity stuff works, it's got a bunch of things. It's got the face on Mars, the pyramids, Mark Carlotto, Stan McDaniel. There's a lot of references to a lot of other information in here. So it's a good book as a 1-volume thing that keeps everything in one place. And, that book did well for the time, especially considering that, there was no on-demand printing. I mean, I literally put together this book because my family had a printing business at the time. I literally took every one of the plates that created this book and photographed it myself at night in the printing presses. When everybody else was gone home, I stayed there all night to create all the plates to create the book. And the original book, this one doesn't have the pictures in because the pictures are visible on the blog, and you've got a few more and better quality ones than were in the original book. In the original book, I had the photographs in the middle, but the quality wasn't great. So anyway, that's an interesting. I'm really glad that Bob Lazar seems to be doing okay, considering they tried to destroy his life and everybody near him for 30 years. Fuckers. I'm glad he told the story. At the same time, when I wrote this book, I was also very aware of what you can do with an anti-gravity machine. And it's a deadly, deadly, deadly weapon. You can destroy a whole planet in a matter of hours with one anti-gravity machine. So there are very good reasons to keep this stuff under wraps, or at least limit access to it to the people that are not fucking crazy and want to take over the world. And I do believe that, there have been technological increases. I do believe there are bases on the moon. I do believe there are probably bases on Mars. I see no reason why with this technology we wouldn't have been able to travel to other solar systems, other than something that I discuss in here, which is the politics of anti-gravity. Imagine if it is indeed true that these, the aliens that I communicated with telepathically have anti-gravity, and assume that it is indeed true that they're not the only ones, that there are I think the classical names for the ones that I spoke to are supposed to be the blues. The blues are supposed to be these Norwegian looking guys, human looking people, that are on our side, kind of thing. Then there's supposed to be the grays, you know, the little zeta reticulans that have a propensity for anal probing. And then there's supposed to be the reptilians, which kind of like the bad guys together with the gray guys are bad. And then some others which are kind of like don't really mess with us too much apparently. But if that's all the case, so what we're saying is that there are multiple civilizations that have discovered this anti-gravity and that are using it. Now, what does the politics become? Because now you've got anti-gravity machines, you want to take over another race of people that also have anti-gravity machines? Well, you can reduce their whole planet to a slag heap, but so can they. And that's already happened in the solar system, because that's kind of the premise also of this book. Mars used to have humans on it, or humanoids of some kind, and I think there must have probably also been a planet between Mars and Jupiter. A war happened. The fact that the war happened, I've described in other videos that I'm doing for, hopefully for Authorized, if that ever kicks off. So I've described the details of that a bit more in there. But the evidence that Mars was intelligently destroyed is undeniable. And that's what Simon Dan, hi Simon Dan, on the 6th of July is going to try and take apart my theory on, you know, if you're interested in the Mars stuff, I can't remember, I think it's video number 11, where I challenged Simon Dan. And the reason I did that is multiple reasons. One is I'm genuinely curious to see if Simon Dan can shoot any holes in my theory. He is a very skeptical guy, but you know, he also believes in climate change and some other, I don't know, vegan stuff he had on his shirt or whatever. So he's definitely not right about everything, but I think he is honest. I think he truly is trying to get to the bottom of things correctly, and I respect his, shall we say, conventional scientific thought. So I'm interested. You know, nobody's shot a hole in anything that I've written for 20 something years, so I'm curious. And also, you know, it's good to get the stuff out there. Now, I did write it in here, and I also reiterated it in a couple of pages in the Systema book. I did write it in here that, look, I understand this technology cannot be just widespread given to everybody. Because again, think of the politics. What if everybody has got, like, let's say you can create anti-gravity with a machine this size, and everybody's got one in their pocket. I mean, you can destroy cities, right? All you need is one crazy fucker and that's it. There's like 10 million people dead. So there's very good reasons for keeping the stuff, the access to it very limited, absolutely. And I agree with that. I don't disagree with that. But at the same time, you know, we're a prison planet of slaves that doesn't really deserve to be treated that way. Now, is it because there are humans that are doing this? But my idea is something else. My idea is something else is that, and that's what I cover in the fiction books, the Overlords of Mars series. My idea is there are these aliens, they are there, and they do have this technology, and we're on the cusp, or we got some of it somehow, and they're like, no, fuck you, we're just going to keep you guys down. But the way to do that is not just to destroy the whole planet, because there's a bunch of other people that also have that technology. So they're like, hey, if you start wiping people, you know, if you start wiping beings, whole planets worth of beings that have this technology or that are trying to get this technology, then who's to say you're not going to do it to us, so we'll do it to you. So it becomes very much a Cold War, a galactic Cold War, because anybody that uses anti-gravity technology to wipe out people is going to have all the other aliens that have that technology is going to go, oh, this guy's just broken the treaty, man. We're going to fucking wipe them out. And that's the politics. So the politics becomes subterfuge. It becomes subterfuge. It becomes leverage. It becomes fear-based stuff, and it becomes ignorance. You know, you want to keep people dumb, stupid, ignorant of the technology, and just get them to fucking whack themselves to death by looking at porn on their phone and not have the ability to read a book of 500 plus pages because they can't concentrate longer than 30 seconds. And if there's too many emojis, they get confused. That's the idea. And that's what we are. We're basically a prison planet. I do believe that there are people in the know that know this. And you know, if you're human, then fucking fight for the humans, bitch, you know? So help us out. Get the fuck off this rock and in other planets and not subjugated by these little alien gray anal prober motherfuckers, if that's what's out there. I mean, you know, I used to say back in the day when I was writing this book and just after and just before, I was on what they call the alt-dot groups, and you know, people are talking about the zeta reticulans and why do they keep anal probing, and are they really experimenting on humans, and are they creating hybrids, and are they synthetic beings or not? And I think they are synthetic beings. I think the greys are probably synthetic creatures that who knows who they're working for exactly. The idea is that the reptilians built the zeta reticulans or the greys, and that the greys are just like sort of henchmen of the reptilians. That's the rumor. And there's another rumor that there was some people in the late 80s or early 90s apparently went to another planet, and I think it's called the Serpo mission. And these guys knew that they weren't going to come back. It was like a one-way trip, but they were going to go to an alien planet. I think there was a dozen of them, men and women. And I think they went to one of the planets of the Zeta Reticulans. Now, this is all speculation. Is it bullshit? Is it real? Is it misinformation? Who the fuck knows? What I know for sure is that fucking alien craft that can move in ways that we can't do exist. And no, they're not all piloted by humans. I do believe that we have anti-gravity machines, technology, piloted by humans, Earth-based humans, or Earth origin humans at least. Maybe they're not Earth-based anymore now, I don't know. But I also believe that there are alien aircraft of alien origin, and I mean alien as in extraterrestrial. That makes me fucking crazy. I don't give a shit, because I lived through it. I was there. I know what happened. I know I'm not fucking crazy. And like Shakespeare said, there's more strange shit in the world and outside of it than any philosophy can encompass. So I guess that means I'm definitely not a flat earther, though. You know, there's an upside. You might say I'm crazy and believe in aliens, but I don't think we live on a flat earth. I believe it's a globe, just like my ancient map one here. I don't know what the fuck's in Antarctica, but I got a pretty good guess that there's Nazi bases were there. I do believe they were there. There's no reason to throw 3 atom bombs in the 1950s over Antarctica that nobody seems to know about, kind of forgot about, and was very classified. There's no reason to send 5,000 men with guns and machines and all sorts just after the Second World War. Nobody has money to do that weird shit, but they did. Project High Jump. So yeah, it was a good, you know, when I wrote this book, after I wrote it, it was almost depressing, because it was like, well, fuck. So I know how all this works. I understand how all this happens. And by the way, that there's multiple ways to prove this, right? Another thing that I wrote a short story for one of Vox's anthologies, The Red Horse. I think it's called Red Space, if I remember right. But Vox edited it pretty heavily, and he edited out some stuff that I think was very pertinent, which is that there is a shadow banking. There's an economy on our planet that is a shadow economy that is bigger than the economy of our planet. And it's an Italian guy and some physicists that figured this out. But basically, if the whole economy of our planet is worth 80, I'm working from memory, so I might be a little bit off on the numbers, but I think I remember them right. The global economy at the time that they did this paper is $85 trillion. The shadow economy of money that just seems to disappear and nobody knows where it really goes is over $100 trillion. So we've got a shadow economy that's bigger than the economy that we all take part in. And one of the suggestions by Joseph Farrell is that these are black projects that are off planet, because if you've got to build spaceships that can hold 300 soldiers, which that was also in the short story. I don't remember if Vox has cut it or not, but there's an autistic, semi-autistic British guy who hacked his way into the Pentagon and found these lists of off-planet ships that have up to 300 people serving on them. So they're big ships. So if you've got these big ships floating around in space, and you know, I'd say that those alien guys would be a bit concerned, you know, so they would try and keep everything tamped down. So I kind of lost my train of thought there. I don't remember exactly where I was going with that, but oh yeah, so the shadow banking, sorry. So the shadow banking stuff is, if you're building these huge ships, you still need resources that would probably come from this planet, because fine, you might have bases on the moon, you might have bases on Mars, you might have people even on other star systems, but it's going to be a limited number of people. Your resources, your technology, your stuff is going to be a lot easier to build on Earth than anywhere else. So it makes sense that if you're building, you know, huge anti-gravity machines, that who knows what exotic materials they need and what special, you know, underground bases to build them and whatever, it makes sense that you would have a huge shadow economy that just sort of disappears. And how do you fund that? And one of the suggestions that Joseph Farrell came up with is, well, if they've got anti-gravity machines, they can mine asteroids, so they can mine whatever they need in terms of rare metals, gold, whatever, you know, they can just literally pull a mountain apart with an anti-gravity machine, get what they want, and be done. Plus, if they've got that level of advanced technology, if you've got a gravity or anti-gravity creating machine, whichever way, it's basically gravity field creation, right? Which only makes sense if you keep in mind the concept of the ether. And the ether is something that Harold Aspen talked about and explained in a way that makes sense. He's not the only one that talked about it. Another guy that talks about it is Thomas Bearden. Thomas Bearden is still alive, spoke to him on the phone 25 years ago. Thomas Bearden has got a lot of stuff on scalar technology and psychotronic weapons, which I mentioned in my book, in my fiction book, but they're not fiction. Most of the fiction in my fiction books is pretty real. It's doable. It's there already. So if you've got an ether, you can, how do you describe an ether in a simple way? Think of an ether as like, okay, I don't know if you know this, but 0 point energy means that in a cubic centimeter of vacuum of space, there are constantly bubbling in and out of existence protons, electrons, and so on. There's enough energy in a cubic centimeter of vacuum of space, hard vacuum of space. There's enough energy in there to like boil off a lake. In a cubic meter, there's enough energy to boil off all the oceans on Earth. But we can't access it because we're basically in it. It's almost like the very nature, the very fabric of reality is popping in and out, is sort of bubbling. And in a way, you could think of that's the ether in a sense, because it's this underlying, now it's there, now it's not, sort of ocean of energy. And it would make sense that light can travel on it as a wave. There you get the whole wave split, you know, particle and wave type thing. And then when it interacts somehow with material reality, then you get the light, or you get a reaction. I mean, you think about a laser. A laser stands for light amplification. What it stands for again? LAS. Light amplification by emission of radiation, something. I can't remember. Light amplification by... Anyway, laser stands for something. It's an acronym. It's something about the amplification of the resonance of the light, and you keep bouncing it backwards and forwards until it hits a critical mass, and then it becomes a really powerful light that spontaneously gets all the other molecules to release the energy all in the same frequency and collimate it, so it becomes so powerful it burns through stuff. Resonance and frequency and so on, which is what Tesla worked on. He's master of resonance. That's what I call him in my book. He understood this stuff. Now, scalar energy, which is what Thomas Bearden talks about in scalar weapons, would be, you would be able to feed a lot of energy into this, call it matrix, and it would appear out somewhere else as an explode. You know, you could use it as an explosion, as a weapon. But the other way around is that you could create a machine that gets access to this 0 point energy, and then you've got infinite amounts of energy, which would explain how you can have anti-gravity technology, because to create an anti-gravity field theoretically is possible, but you have to use the energy. To give you an idea, 1 gram, okay, 1 gram is roughly the weight of like one of these earplugs, probably maybe a bit less. So 1 gram of matter, if you convert that to raw energy, is enough energy to feed 26,500 people for a year in terms of energy. So, you know, the energy that you get from your food is not matter converted to energy, right? It's just a tiny percentage of the food that becomes energy. But if you could convert completely 1 gram of matter into energy that your body uses to feed itself, you could feed one person for 26,000 something years, or 26,000 people for a year. That's 1 gram. To create a tiny wormhole, a tiny gravity field that's about the size of a meter across, if I remember right, you'd have to convert all the mass of a planet the size of Jupiter into raw energy just to hold that thing open for like a couple of seconds or something. So it's incalculable, huge amounts of energy that you need to create gravity fields, which is why Bob Lazar is saying, you know, these things are scary because what the fuck? But if you can create a machine, and that's essentially what an anti-gravity machine is, it's a machine that gives you access to the 0 point energy. So once you started it, once you can get that potential difference, you don't need anything else. You've now got access to it, and you can use that energy in the machine itself to make it do whatever, which would also explain why there are no moving parts and so on. Keep in mind that top secret German thing that creates energy out of thin air, which is magnets. So these non-moving parts create a field that creates energy. So that is basically getting a tiny access to this 0 point energy that's bubbling all the time. Keep in mind also that we're talking about, you know, if you can access 10 to the minus 150 of the 0 point energy, you still have enough energy to do whatever the hell you want. So we're talking about absolutely astronomical numbers in terms of the energy that is available. And an anti-gravity machine seems to be a machine that essentially creates this potential difference that allows you to then use that energy. And the fact that you can now use that energy to power the same machine that gave you the access of it can now create gravity fields in some way. And now Bob Lazar mentions also element 115, which weirdly enough, you know, XCOM, the computer game XCOM, which is a brilliant game. I still used to play it when I had an iPad, and I gave the iPad to my kid, but it's a brilliant game. In the original XCOM, they talk about element 115 because the Bob Lazar story, I mean, it was everywhere. You know, in the early 90s, it was everywhere. So if you're born in, you know, late 80s or early 90s or after, you probably don't know any of this stuff. But Bob Lazar was a fucking legend, and he is, because he's like a super geek, but he's really a cool guy, and you know, he had a tough time. So maximum respect to him, really, for getting the information out. And you know, I think it's time that it got accepted that this technology exists, and tell us the fucking truth. Are we at war, in a cold war with these fucking aliens? You know, what's the story, really? You know, we should be able to know that, because I don't want to fucking be in a prison planet where I have to keep pretending that I have to use fucking fossil fuels and shit like that, when literally we could be fucking off to Mars in like half an hour, you know? I could go take my fucking dog, which I don't have, for a piss on Mars, and don't need even a spacesuit. Why? Because I can create a fucking energy field around it. I can create a dome. That's all this science fiction shit that I'm talking about. It's real. You can do it, and it's all in my book. So if you want to read a cool science fiction story, which, by the way, warning, there's a little bit of graphic sex in both books, and the second book opens with a pretty graphic sex scene. But there's a reason for that, which is a very long loop. You know, I'll have to be at the end of book 3 or 4 before you figure out why there's this kind of somewhat twisted, perverse sexual stuff in the book. And I conceived of it that way originally. So it's not something that came up later. I conceived of that originally. Although it's taken on a very surreal perspective, because in the meantime, I've become a Christian. So it's kind of surreal, because the loop, the very long story loop that I had in because you can read those books on many levels, right? You can just read it as a little adventure science fiction story. You can read it as a geek. You can read it as a geek that actually knows some shit. You can read it as a scientist. You can read it as a philosopher. You can read it, it's got multiple levels of stuff in there. And you can read it just for fun as this is a cool story that would make a really good movie, actually. So don't fucking steal my ideas, because I will sue. If you steal my Overlords of Mars, I will sue for that one. I let the Face on Mars stuff go. I didn't sue Graham Hancock when he ripped off my book. I didn't sue some other people, which my brother was telling me, you should sue them. And I was like, I don't care. I figured it out first, and the information's out there now, and that's good. That's fine. And they didn't really use a lot of my shit. They just used kind of some of the basic stuff, so it's okay. But steal my Overlords of Mars and make a movie out of that, I will fucking sue you into the ground. So, if you're interested in that stuff and what it would mean and what you can do and the speculation of it, that's what my science fiction books are about. It's essentially the speculation of, okay, so this stuff is real. Now what? What's the real story? What's really happening out there while we're sitting down here like idiots on a wheel, going to work 12 hours a day on our whatever, doing whatever the fuck, and working at McDonald's or doing PR like I'm doing, whatever fucking shit you're doing. Instead of doing that, we could be like in spaceships, fucking checking out the galaxy. Fuck, fuck. I want to be out there, not fucking sitting down here. But, so that's kind of where I'm coming from. Anyway, I kind of rattled this off at high speed, so hopefully it kept you entertained, busy. And did I mention? Yes, I think I did mention, right, that the fact that the component parts of the UFO that Bob Lazar describes don't need wires because, again, the Nazis had a prototype of that sort of thing right at the beginning. And once it works, then you can just use the energy that it's getting to make it work even better, and then you can create these fields. So I think it's a very interesting stuff, very interesting time, and for all his faults, I'm glad that Joe Rogan had Bob Lazar on. I'm really glad about that. And, besides, who knows what pressures have been put on people and so on. I know Bob Lazar went through hell. I know I didn't go through that much. I went through some stuff. I still got some psyop stuff. The last one was not that long ago, a couple of years ago. You still get psyop stuff. And I've learned to see it because I saw it very early on. I saw what happened when I'd just written the book and when I was trying to disseminate information, the type of people that I met, the type of things that happened to my hard drives and my computers, and but I think after a while they figured out this guy's not a threat. He kind of knows that this technology should be kept quiet, really, and or limited. Access to it should be limited by responsible people. And I don't know that the people looking at this are responsible. Who the fuck knows? Generally speaking, military guys are pretty paranoid, so I'm hopeful that they are decent, but who knows? There's so much evil shit in the deep state. I mean, just look at fucking Hillary Clinton and those motherfuckers, and they're evil fucking personified. So I don't know. The last people I want on earth to have access to that shit are people like the Clintons, and I'm not sure that any one person would be good to have access to all that stuff. But maybe you could have a balance of power, like the Cold War that the aliens are probably in is probably a good thing. But we want to get into that club, We're like on the hind foot. If the Greys have it, the Blues have it, the Reptilians have it, there's all these aliens that have all this shit, and we're like fucking Iran, Well, we want the bomb too. No, you little bastards, you're gonna fucking stay down. And reasonably speaking, I mean, human beings are fucking dangerous things, right? I mean, we're fucking crazy. We're not a homogeneous people. We're rebellious. We're mixed in with monkeys, and a lot of us are still fucking monkeys in many ways. Whoever we came from, whatever we came from, and again, my ancient astronaut genetic engineering theory is discussed in here because, again, logic is a thing, and if you've got some human types on Mars and you got some human types on another planet that got whacked to shit, and you've got another human types here on Earth, and maybe you've got other human types somewhere else, well, it's got to be some relationship, right? So honestly, it is a good reference book. I do recommend it, although I'm the guy that wrote it, and I hope you enjoy it, read it. Comment, let me know about it, and do me a favor, share this video and give it thumbs up, because this is a video that helps spread real information that we don't have, that not a lot of people know about. And it's factual. You can check it. You can double check it. You can check everything in this book. Try and shoot holes in it if you want. You're going to have a hard time. No one's managed so far. So, and be around for the 6th of July. I hope that, I don't know what Simon Dan is going to do. I don't know whether we will have a live talk or whatever. I doubt it. He's probably just going to take apart my video and then put that up. But it would be cool to have a one-on-one with Simon Dan on live. That would be interesting. I'd be willing to do that if he's up for it. That's it for now. Sorry, it was a bit ranty and a bit quick, but I've got stuff to do, and I just wanted to get this out there as quickly as. So let me know your thoughts on it. And, I try to respond to most comments, apart from the gamma fuckers who they go straight to the gamma mass grave. But, everyone else that's interested or whatever, you've got questions and stuff. I don't know that I'll be able to answer all of you, but, I try. So let me know. Hope you enjoyed it.